Hello, everyone. My name is David Hamilton. I'm the founder and chairman of the America's Future Series, and we've just had a short intermission, part of the America's Future Series Cyberland, Air, Sea, and Space Symposium. Had a great day so far. The speakers, of course, are all incredibly interesting, very passionate about national security, ensuring the safety and security of all of us. We thank them for their service on the eve of Veterans Day. We're very proud to have these leaders with us. And on this 246th anniversary, the birthday of the Marines, we want to salute all of them, thank them for their service, and say, go Devil Dogs. We appreciate your service. We're going to bring back Major General Boe Young, who has been a staunch supporter of the America's Futures for some time and serves on a board of advisors. He's going to take it away and have a wonderful conversation with Lieutenant General Nina Armagno, or otherwise known as Ninja. And thank you, Bo, and I hope you have a great conversation. I know you will.
Great, thanks, David. Is the general with us? I know we did a comms check earlier.
I am. You have me loud and clear?
There we go. All right, thanks so much for being here today.
Absolutely, thank you.
Let me do a short intro and then we'll just blast off into some great questions here. Lieutenant General Gina Armagno is the Director of Staff for the headquarters of the U.S. Space Force in the Pentagon. And in this role, she synchronizes policy plans, positions, procedures, and cross-functional issues for the U.S. Space Force headquarters staff. She earned her commission and graduated from the Air Force Academy in June 1988. She's a career space operator with more than 32 years of operational experience. She's the only person to have commanded both launch wings in the United States Air Force and the first female general officer commissioned in the U.S. Space Force. Prior to this assignment, she was the Director Space Programs, Office of the Assistant Secretary for Acquisition in Virginia. She directed the development and procurement of space programs to Air Force major commands, product centers, and laboratories, and her experience in space systems operation includes combat mission-ready operators, instructor and evaluator, flight commander, and a strategic missile warning, space surveillance, space control, space launch, and theater missile warning areas. Again, thanks so much for being here.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So the Space Force is, of course, you know, I guess it's new kid on the block. It's not that new, I guess, anymore. But let's start before we launch into the no pun intended, the Space Force per se. Let's talk about, if you don't mind, the threat and how you would characterize the threat in space.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Bo. Good afternoon. Thanks for having me. I really am honored to be part of such a prestigious event. I look at some of the names on the list today and I say, are you sure you got the right Lieutenant General for this time slot? But again, thank you. And actually, before we start, I do need to shout out to my sister service there, the United States Marine Corps. Happy birthday, Marines. It's an honor to be, well, even a smaller service than you all. Small and mighty, and we are working every day to prove that. Also, happy early Veterans Day to everyone who has served in the past, who's currently serving, and of course your families. I thank you for your dedication to this great nation. So talking about the United States Space Force and the threat we face, you know, like you said, Bo, we have been operating for quite a while. We have, there's been space operations in the United States military for decades. And these decades, it has been a benign environment. We have had freedom of maneuver. We've had freedom of operation. We've had the ability to really deliver exquisite space-based capabilities. Most people are familiar with GPS. We also provide exquisite satellite communications, both wideband and narrowband. We provide weather data from space that helps not only troops on the ground and at sea and in the air plan out their military operations, but we also, combine with NOAA to provide great weather prediction for the nation. Also missile warning. We provide at the strategic level and also at the in-theater level. So the United States really is a spacefaring nation. We've been so for a while. That is changing because both Russia and China are actively pursuing weapons in space. And we couldn't really even put the words weapons and space together in the same sentence a couple of years ago. We've worked with the intelligence community to be able to talk about some of the things we're seeing. Back in 2007, we're actually kind of tired of talking about 2007 because it was so long ago, 2006, 2007, when China sent an anti-satellite up to basically blow up one of their weather satellites. It was a defunct weather satellite. The Chinese did this, and they, when it first happened, some people thought, well, how irresponsible, look at all the debris they created. And then others were saying, my goodness, this is a demonstration. This is a demonstration of capability of a weapon. If they could destroy one of their own satellites in low Earth orbit, why couldn't they destroy American satellites or allied satellites in low Earth orbit? So that was really the first shout across the bow, if you will, or shot across the bow. Today, we can talk about a couple of the capabilities that we're seeing. We're seeing both the Russians and Chinese pursue capabilities that exist on the ground, like both countries have anti-satellite missiles, ground-based. Both countries have ground-based jammers that can interfere with satellite operations. Both countries have ground-based optical lasers, so that can dazzle our satellites and interfere with operations. And then there's on-orbit capabilities. The Chinese have the Shijian-17, which is a satellite with an orbital arm. And that arm is a threatening perspective. I know the Chinese are talking about the Shijian-17 as a space-based maintenance capability, but the satellites then would have to be maintainable. And none of our satellites are maintainable. They would have to have some kind of an on-orbit port, something that could be removed, some maybe even a fuel a connector. We don't build satellites that way, not yet. And in the future, we would like to have maintainability. But that arm can do a lot of things. It can do a lot of damage if it was employed in that way. And the Russians have what the CSO, General Raymond, calls the Russian nesting doll. It's basically a satellite within a satellite within a satellite. We first saw some of this type of activity in 2017. And then in 2019, the Russians cozied right up to one of our national security satellites. And again, another threatening demonstration. They deployed a satellite from the mothership and then another object from that second satellite. And that object was a probe. This demonstration of basically weapons right next to a national security satellite was very bold, provocative, and I think a demonstration of weapons types of capability in space.
Yeah, I think, we all take it for granted how all of these modern conveniences like GPS and your phone and everything, even your ATM machine is all tied. We take it for granted. I don't know that people really stop and think how related it is to what's flying around over our heads. But clearly we're in a new domain, and really the Space Force was created in recognition of that. So
yes,
the Space Force was created really by, as I understand it, consolidating existing resources within the DoD. And I wondered if you would just take a moment, and we do have a chart if you want to use that to show sort of how it's organized and how you all thought about putting an organization together when you were first building it and standing it up.
Okay, I would love to. Let's just hold off on that picture for a second, if you would.
Okay.
You know, I was working in the Pentagon at the time that the National Defense Authorization Act was signed by President Trump on December 19th of 2020. And to be honest, it caught a lot of us by surprise. We knew there had been discussions about space. There was bipartisan and even bicameral support for a space corps, or some type of recognition of space, military space in a new way. But when that NDAA was signed and the Space Force was created, we all said, oh, we better get to work. Now, there had been a planning team, of course, and they were planning to plan, but we thought we were going to have years to plan. We thought we were going to have at least another year to continue work and to continue, advocating on the Hill and elsewhere for a Space Force. So when it happened, I remember I was working over in, like you mentioned in my bio, I was working in space acquisitions, and General D.T. Thompson was also in the building. He's now our Vice Chief of Space Operations. He asked me to come over and help stand up the service. So I did. I came over, and it was basically him. We had just hired Miss Mulcahy, so she was the S1, so taking care of all of our personnel and manpower type of activities. And there was no one else. So I took on the role of the S2, so intelligence, S3 for operations, the 4. Thank goodness I didn't do too much with the 4, that was logistics. The 6 for communications, the 8, I was building the budget, the 9 for analysis, and the 10 for nuclear. And people jokingly called me the S47 because they just added up all the numbers of the hats I was wearing and watched me, almost literally run from meeting to meeting in this building. But seriously, while this is going on, the planning team continued planning, and we were very mindful of the fact that we were immediately part of the DoD, immediately still, part of the Department of the Air Force, and that our leaders needed to represent the service equities just like the other services were doing. We had to participate in the types of meetings that happen around this building, the op steps, the tanks, the DMAGs, the JROC, and I know that's alphabet soup for some of you, but really these are the major meetings that it's how the DoD runs, it's how DoD conducts business, and we had to be part of those. So no one was happier than I to see us, confirming general officers and getting them onboarded and starting and hiring the people that we eventually got on board. We knew we had a deliberate and clean sheet approach of looking at our service. We knew we were going to be small. We are going to stay small. We will certainly always be smaller than our brothers and sisters in the Marine Corps. So when we looked at how that should, look on paper, we decided to take away a couple of layers of bureaucracy. And so, the whole intent is to be lean, agile, and mission focused so that the Space Force can focus on mission, and the Air Force, and thank goodness they do, they support us in all other types of activities. So running bases, providing civil engineers and cops, our doctors and lawyers, that's all still coming from the Air Force. And thank goodness we have such strong partnership there. It allows us to focus on the mission. So if you want to put up the chart, I will.
Yeah, Michelle and David, can we do that? There we go. I assume you can see that.
It's really just a almost like a rudimentary view of what the Space Force looks like. So we have our Chief of Space Operations here in the Pentagon. We have the headquarters staff here. We have 3 field commands, one that does operations, one that does Space Systems Command. It does our acquisition and development, capability development, procurement and such. They also do launch operations. And then our Space Training and Readiness Command has everything from test and training to writing doctrine for us. What some of you will notice is that we took out a couple of layers. We took out a GEO layer, a numbered Air Force layer that used to be a 3-star command. They were operationally responsible for all of space operations. And we took out a layer, basically combining at the 06 level, what used to be the group. We basically took out the group command and renamed our wing command colonel layer of responsibility. We've renamed our wings deltas. And so the triangle on the right shows field command, delta, and then squadron commanders are still 05 level. And the reason we shrunk, literally shrunk our organizational design here was so that we could more rapidly communicate. And again, it's all about lean, agile, and mission focused. We thought, and we are providing basically a quicker route from the tactical layer at the bottom to the strategic layer of command at the top.
Yeah, that's fascinating, and I think we can probably take the slide down now. I think there's some lessons learned for other services there for sure, because I know at least in the Army we're sort of still wedded to the Napoleonic organizational construct, and yeah, with the way technology and particularly communication has evolved over, particularly accelerated over the last several years, it does make you wonder about some of the command and control or mission command layers we have. When you all were figuring out your relationship back to the Air Force service, there's a Marine question in here. I'm getting to did you look to the Marine Navy model in a lot of ways to try and figure out how that would work?
We did. We looked at the Marine Navy model, and some of our relationships are based on that. When I mentioned that the Air Force is going to take care of certain support activities for us, I think that is a similar relationship with the Marines and the Navy. But what we also looked at, it was very interesting to bring in a couple of consulting companies, and they helped us organize our headquarters layer here in the Pentagon. And this is not based really on any military organization. We actually asked them to look at business models, corporate models, to talk to us about some of the lessons learned, some of the best practices coming out of corporate America. And so what we did was we named our instead of the typical Napoleonic, we still know what the S1 is, but we named that office the Chief Human Capital Office. For operations, we combined intel, ops, logistics, communications, and now they've added an exercise, training and exercise branch. So that would be like a 7. We put that all under one 3-star general, and that's the Chief Operations Office. We combined the 5 and the 8, so that's requirements and strategy on the 5 side, with the planning and the programming on the 8 side, and that's all under one 3-star general as well. And then we created something that doesn't quite exist, and it's our Chief Technology and Innovation Officer. That has the 9 in it for analysis, and then some. This organization is helping us build a digital headquarters, have a digital focus, bring tech, high tech solutions, not only to the headquarters level here in terms of business tools, but also across the entire force. An office totally dedicated to making us, basically go faster in the tech realm. So that was probably one of the most interesting and innovative pieces of standing up this new service that I've seen.
Did you confuse everybody in the Pentagon?
Yes. Yes. So what we've had to do, of course, is, and you actually, if you walked down to where their offices are on the E-ring, if you go by the Chief Operations Officer office or any one of their offices here in the Pentagon, underneath operations, it says 2/3/4/6. It's great.
Yeah, well, it makes a lot of sense. And again, sort of, consolidating, getting rid of potential stovepipes and all that. So, one of the more interesting things about building a brand new organization, and I have a little experience with this, but certainly not at the scale of building a service, is being able to build a new culture. And so I wonder if you could talk about that and the fun parts of doing that, as well as the the challenging parts.
As you know, from helping build up Army Futures Command, as you did, what we're learning is we know culture is important, absolutely, but like General Raymond has started saying, you can't order culture overnight from Amazon. It's just not something you can shop for, pick off the shelf, and implement. We've done a few things up front that have, I think, helped with identity. And for example, our motto is Semper Supra. It means always above. And there was a young airman stationed in Germany who submitted the idea of Semper Supra, and now that is our motto. The term guardians came from a previous motto, Air Force Space Command, back in '92 when the Air Force Space Command was stood up. Their motto was Guardians of the High Frontier, with our mission to protect and defend the space domain. Guardians of the High Frontier, it's still relevant. So we've kind of, pulled a thread from the past, and we can also, project it into the future, because that's going to be, that is our role, and that's going to be our role as we continue to build out the capabilities we need to protect and defend the space domain, so that we can guarantee space superiority whenever our nation needs it. But I think what we're learning as we do this is the most important thing is to get input from the men and women who serve, and the all who have ties to the missions that we perform each and every day. And so doing that has been interesting. We had early on, we did out of my office, we did a cultural survey, and we were really small back then. So I think we only had about 190 participants in the survey, which someone very quickly said that it's not statistically significant. So so a few months later, we got several thousand participants, and we're working through things deliberately, taking our time and making sure that these are thought through, and that they have the buy-in from guardians, because we think when you begin to make these cultural decisions, they're one-way decisions, and we have to be very careful that they're the right decisions.
Yeah, it makes you think, or wonder, gee, if the services could kind of start over, and I know this is dreaming in some ways, but what would they do differently, both structurally, culturally, and it's not a veiled criticism of anybody. It's just you guys have done so many interesting things and taken, frankly, what seems like a different approach, and it's really fascinating to hear. If we can drop down a level or two here and talk about sort of accomplishments. So you're you're coming up on your second birthday. This is, we're celebrating birthdays today. And what do you, obviously establishing the headquarters is sort of like, accomplishment one.
Yeah.
What else would you say are some of your biggest accomplishments?
Well, I actually brought some show and tell.
Okay.
We wrote our first doctrine, and it's incredible. What I love about this is that it was actually written before, it was begun before we were a service. It was begun by a group of young lieutenant colonels and below, enlisted, and it wasn't assigned. This was not a go-do. They got together and started thinking about space as a warfighting domain, the space domain as a new, a new form of, or space as a new form of warfare. And they wrote this doctrine. And so actually, if you would allow me, I just want to read a little tiny bit of this, because maybe you will join me in being absolutely blown away by the incredible brain power. I don't know how they knew this, but here's what they wrote. Just like warfare in any other domain, space warfare is a violent clash of opposing wills. Notably, the adversary in space warfare is never a spacecraft or an inanimate object. Space warfare targets the mind of an adversary and seeks to neutralize their capability and will to resist. Military space forces compete against thinking actors who threaten our nation's prosperity, security, and political aims. Thus, military space forces must prepare to outwit, outmaneuver, and dominate thinking, competent, and lethal aggressors who are attempting to thwart US actions. I've gotten to meet some of these authors,
Yeah.
and they are our future leaders. Well, the Space Force is in good hands.
Yeah, I got a little goosebump going on. That's a ground pounding Army guy. So yeah, they're on the right, hit the right threads for sure.
Isn't that amazing? It's just amazing. The first year we also published our Chief of Space Operations planning guidance. I think General Berger did this for the Marine Corps a couple of years ago. And so this outlines top 5 priorities for the CSO. They're kind of shaped by organize, train, equip, innovate, and integrate. And so I yeah, I don't know if you want me to go through all the top 5 priorities, but this outlines them, and the whole planning guide tells us how, what structures to put in place to achieve them. So we are knee deep in implementing this guidance, and that's been fantastic. We transferred a whole bunch of people into the Space Force. We transferred units from the Air Force. Almost any unit that was doing space operations or space related activities came over to the Space Force. People, we built our first budget. I was definitely knee deep in that activity, wearing one of those hats. We were actually able to put forth a $17.4 billion first budget for the United States Space Force, defend it here in the building, which is quite an experience. And I hope that soon it will be enacted into law here in the National Defense Authorization Act. Of course, like the rest of the building, we're working on the 23 POM and already planning for 24. So year one has been just chock full of stand up and growth activity. But what I love to highlight is that we have not missed a beat as far as mission accomplishment or operations. All of this activity organizationally has not touched the exceptional expertise we have operating our platforms each and every day. So mission accomplishment, 100% untouched by all of the flurry of standing up a new service.
Yeah.
Pretty cool.
As you look forward into the next year or so, and things become more routine, what are you mainly focused on there in terms of priorities?
We just released a human capital strategy that we're calling the Guardian Ideal. And so in this next year, we're going to be implementing that, making it more operational. This Guardian Ideal kind of talks to all of us about everything from recruiting and retaining all the way through professional development for all ranks of guardians and civilian guardians, of course, and taking care of them and their families throughout their entire careers. So I really like how we as a service have focused on people first. We have just announced or getting very close to announcing, we have announced about 670 inter-service transfers from the Army, Navy, and yes, Marine Corps and Air Force to come over into the Space Force. And that activity is going to keep us quite busy for a while. We continue to partner with our allies. General Raymond always says this too, we don't go it alone in space. It's too vast of a domain, and there's way too much interest and impact across the globe for us to think that we would or could go it alone. So we have great partnerships with the UK, who has established their own space command, France, which established their space command, and they renamed their Air Force the French Air and Space Force. Japan established its first space operations squadron. NATO is putting together a space operations center in Germany, and then Germany itself stood up its own space command this past summer. So a lot of ally activity and focus as well as we move forward. We've joined our intelligence apparatus has joined the IC. We are the 18th member of the intelligence community. That's a very important as we work with the intel community and also advocate for resources. We are working on something called force design, which is kind of a, it's a little bit architecture work. It's a little bit capability development, but we're going mission area by mission area to design the force we need to face the challenges that both Russia and China pose in the space domain. And so for missile warning, for example, we are designing a layered hybrid architecture. Today, we have a set of very exquisite satellites in geosynchronous orbit. That's a great neighborhood to be in. They get to stare down at one spot on the Earth 24/7 and detect infrared, signatures on the ground or in the air.
I don't know if everyone is having the same issue.
Part of the answer is to build a resilient architecture. And so this force design work concluded that we need to have a layered capability, satellites in various types of orbits, different satellites with differing capabilities each. And therefore we can get after the threats that are emerging, like hypersonics and others. So that's the first mission area. Moving into year 3 here, we're going to be looking at other mission areas like a data transport layer, satellite communications, and other mission areas.
I wonder if we can pull the thread on the allies a little bit, and along with sort of norms of behavior, and talk about that. How do we promote in the global community a more normalization of behavior in space, and how a Space Force, if they are involved in that?
Well, it's an incredible opportunity, and it does seem like our allies are all in. We have our traditional allies, of course, that I mentioned, previously with the UK. Basically our Five Eyes partners, but we are also partnering with other nations like Norway and Japan. In fact, really interesting projects that we're working on with those two countries is that their satellites are going to launch US payloads. So for example, with Norway, they're hosting a satellite communication payload on 2 of their satellites, and those satellites are launching in 2022. That's going to take care of a polar communication coverage. For Japan, they are hosting a satellite, or they have their own satellite. It's their equivalent of GPS. It's called QZSS, Quasi-Zenith Satellite System. It is more of a regional position, navigation, and timing system. It really orbits in a figure 8 pattern, if you will, over Japan and the region there. We're going to launch on one of their next QZSSs coming up in 2023. We're going to launch what we call space domain awareness sensor. So on their satellite, we're going to have a sensor that looks out and around and tries to have a better understanding of the domain. What other satellites are out there? What are they doing? Who's operating them? It's a great partnership. And of course, in all of this, there's the opportunity to share data and to continue to work together on things like this. So I'm really excited about those kind of opportunities, but there's also other nations that are more emerging spacefaring nations like Brazil. You think about where Brazil is on the map. They're very close to the equator and
Okay, so I know we've been having a couple of IT issues. We're just going to take a little pause here and see if we can get the general back on line and finish up. We have about 5 minutes, so I'd ask just for your patience here, and we know their issues. We're going to go on a little pause here. I'm going to put myself on mute to pause my video, but we're not leaving. Anyway, just please be patient. We'll see if we can get her back up.
Yep. So General, one thing we might recommend is asking General Armagno to turn off her video and just go by voice only. That may help.
Yeah, I think we've lost her completely.
No, I'm here,
Oh, okay. Okay, great.
but
Sorry
I
about
did,
that.
I did just turn my video off
Okay,
per direction.
great. So I think I'll keep mine off as well. And
Okay.
we were in the middle of the Brazil question, which is actually was a
Yeah.
question in the chat and in the question and answer. So maybe you could rewind and briefly discuss Brazil's role.
Great. Yes, an emerging space company. I'm sorry. Are you guys still there?
Yeah, we're here.
Okay.
good.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just lost something here. They are an emerging spacefaring nation, is what I was saying, and they are just lost something here. They are a spacefaring nation, is what I was. Launch capability. If you look at where Brazil is on the globe, they're right near the equator. Therefore, the cost to get resources in orbit is much reduced because they're close to the equator. They can basically insert right there and don't have to expend fuel and other resources getting into. They can basically be very excited to partner with the United States as well. So we have signed a data sharing agreement with them regarding space domain awareness data sharing agreement. And, that's one example of a promising future relationship, a promising growing relationship with a burgeoning spacefaring nation.
Yeah, that's great. We have time for just a couple questions. I'm gonna pick a couple out of the Q&A, and one was about
Okay.
reserve component. So do you foresee or where can you tell us where Space Force is at in terms of a reserve guard or reserve component, Federal Reserve component?
We are definitely working a reserve. Basically, we're calling it a single component. And the idea is that in the Space Force, active and reserve are combined into a single component. I'll leave a space guard on the table for a moment while I talk about the reserve and active single component. It's not approved yet. We're still working on it with the Hill, of course, offices in the Pentagon here. But we think it would provide a lot of flexibility to Guardians. If you want to go get a master's or a PhD, so some kind of a extended education opportunity, you could apply to be quote unquote part-time, and you could go do something like that. If you need to take time out to have a child, for example, that could be possible. Life happens, and aging parents, and just providing our Guardians flexibility to kind of have a permeable situation here where they can come in and out of active duty. Now, of course, we have to consider all aspects of what we're proposing here. And the devil is definitely in the details as we're starting to dig into the details. What does it mean to be part-time? Do we have to use the old definitions that the Air Force used, for reserves? We're really starting to dig into all of that. And then just to be frankly honest, the Space Guard piece is, it is tabled. For now, it is something that, of course, we would like to pursue with the National Guard. They are extremely amazing partners. You know, here's another thing. We can't do our jobs. We cannot conduct space operations without the Guard and Reserve. And so whatever form this takes in the future, whatever approvals we end up getting and how we design ourselves, we will always need a Guard and Reserve space capability to do our mission day to day.
Well, you know, it's an area that I served mostly in, was the reserve component, and the kind of things that you all are talking about are really interesting, because the Army has talked about how it could sort of fix its current construct to do some of the things that you all are talking about in terms of making it easier to go back and forth between components. So it's another area where, because you're new and you're standing it up, you can sort of do it right, if you will, and do it creatively in a way that other services, you know, are locked in some ways to certain processes and procedures, and in some ways, you know, their own domains and turf, frankly. We're almost out of time. I just want to turn it over to you for any final thoughts and questions or comments.
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Please go ahead. I think the general asked you a question about your final thoughts and comments.
Yes, I was providing them.
Ah,
I'm
the
sorry.
gremlins are numerous.
Oh, yes. We may be able to attribute these gremlins too. Let me just say. But I wanted to thank you for having me. I wanted to articulate the strategic shift that's happening across the globe with Russia, but namely China. And the space domain is going to play a central role in this changing strategic shift and narrative. And we are proud to serve and proud to be here for our nation. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. And this is really interesting. I learned a lot, and I know most people in the audience did as well. So, David, let me turn it back over to you.
Well, thank you, Bo. Thank you both for that very insightful conversation. And I want to say about Nina, you know, I've heard her speak before, and she's clearly brilliant and very capable and accomplished, but she's always very gracious and actually a little self-effacing in her humor, et cetera. Anyway, you know, she's just really gracious and a great leader, and we need more leaders like Ninja. So thank you both. Appreciate you both being here.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.